Heart on Fire, Susan B. Anthony Votes for President by Anne Malaspina, illustrated by Steve James. Rochester, New York, November 1st, 1872. 4 days to the presidential election. Register now, the morning paper said. Susan B. Anthony jumped up to grab her purse and wrap. Out the door and down the street she flew. Her sister Hannah and friend Mary hoisted their skirts to keep up. Women couldn't be equal to men if they did not vote. Miss Anthony's heels tapped faster and faster. At the voter registration office, she marched in like a gust of wind. This was the moment Miss Anthony had dreamed of for so long. She demanded to register to vote. The inspectors looked up, shocked and confused. Only men could sign up to vote, not women who owned property, paid taxes, held a job, or raised children. No woman was allowed to cast a ballot. Outrageous, unbelievable, true. Miss Anthony believed women did have the right to vote because of a new law, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. The 14th Amendment said all persons born in the United States have the same rights as citizens, she told the men. Wasn't she a person and a citizen? The inspectors scratched their heads. They argued, yes, Miss Anthony's right, and debated. Women can't vote, they disagreed. Finally, one man said, sign here. And it was done. Miss Anthony had registered. Election Day, November 5th, 1872. Up at dawn, Miss Anthony raced to the polls at 7 a.m. sharp. Lighting the match, Miss Anthony cast her vote. Throwing more tinder, 15 other women voted too. That night before she slept, she wrote her good friend Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Well, I have been and gone and done it. Miss Anthony had voted for president. Trouble was simmering. The deputy federal marshal stepped into the parlor and took off his beaver hat. What did he come for? To arrest you, he said, turning red. Miss Anthony held out her hand. I demand I should be arrested properly. But he would not handcuff a lady. At the federal office downtown, she saw her sisters, her friends who voted, even the men who let them vote. All arrested too. The charge? Voting without having the lawful right to vote. Then she was sent home to wait. In January, the news got worse. Miss Anthony must pay $1,000 or go to jail until her trial. Outrageous! Unbelievable! True! When her lawyer paid the bail, Miss Anthony was angry. She didn't want to give the court a dime. Her trial was set for spring. News of her arrest spread like wildfire, sparking fury. The lady has done no wrong, wrote one reporter, in applause. Female lawlessness, another declared. Miss Anthony knew she was right. Without the vote, women had no say in laws, in government, in the future. To her, voting was everything. To fail was impossible. She cut every story out of the paper to save. From winter to spring of 1873. As the trial drew closer, she took to the roads to argue her case. Washington, D.C. to Philadelphia to Chicago. Towns large and small, 100 people in one hamlet came out in a fierce snowstorm to hear her speak. Is it a crime for a citizen of the United States to vote? She demanded to know. Many clapped for her. Some weren't so sure. A few hissed and shook their heads. It was a crime for a woman to vote. She must face the consequences. June 17, 1873, the Ontario County Courthouse, New York. Not a seat was empty when Miss Anthony strode into the courtroom in her new silk bonnet. People had come from miles away, congressmen, news reporters, curiosity seekers, and friends. How proud she looked. Did she know this was a trial no woman could win? No one could hear her burning heart pounding. The United States for Susan B. Anthony. Miss Anthony's lawyer defended her. She was as lawful a voter as I am, or any other man is. The prosecutor attacked her. If she is a woman and she voted, and voting by a woman is against the law, then she is guilty. The judge had heard enough. He pulled a paper from his pocket. The 14th Amendment gives no right to a woman to vote, he read out loud, and the voting by Miss Anthony was in violation of the law. He told the jury to find her guilty. The greatest outrage history ever witnessed, she wrote in her journal that night. The next day, the judge asked, "Do you have anything to say?" Miss Anthony rose to her feet. "Yes, Your Honor, I have many things to say. You have trampled underfoot every vital principle of our government. My natural rights, my civil rights, my political rights, my judicial rights are all alike ignored." The crowd inhaled. The prosecutor tightened his lips. The judge banged his gavel. The court cannot allow the prisoner to go on. Her heart was on fire. No one could stop her. The prisoner must sit down, roared the judge. She spoke louder still, but it was no use. The trial was over. Miss Anthony was found guilty. The judge ordered her to pay $100 plus court costs. Outrageous, unbelievable, true. She had one more thing to say, as a person and a citizen. "May it please Your Honor," Miss Anthony said, "I shall never pay $1 of your unjust penalty." And Susan B. Anthony never did. By voting in the federal election in 1872, Susan Brownell Anthony hoped to claim her rights as a citizen under the 14th Amendment. The new amendment was one of 3 adopted by Congress after the Civil War to give freedom and citizenship to Black Americans. She believed the 14th Amendment granted full citizenship and the vote to women too, but many people disagreed. Anthony knew that her vote might be challenged. The laws in New York and across the country, except in the territories of Wyoming and Utah, allowed only men to vote. Like Rosa Parks in 1955, a Black woman who refused to sit in the back of a bus as the segregationist laws of Alabama required, Anthony was practicing civil disobedience. She broke an unjust law in order to try and change it, but Anthony never expected to be arrested. "I never dreamed of the U.S. officers prosecuting me for voting," she wrote in a letter. After losing the trial, Anthony asked Congress to lift her $100 fine. Though she never went to jail or paid the fine still held. In 1875, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled the 14th Amendment did not protect the right for women to vote. Anthony turned her attention to winning a new amendment, the Women's Suffrage Amendment, which would guarantee women the right to vote. Year after year, Congress refused to pass the law. Born on February 15, 1820, to a Quaker family, Anthony fought all her life for the rights for women. She and a friend, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, founded the National Women's Suffrage Association in 1869 to gain the vote for women. From her home in Rochester, New York, Anthony traveled tirelessly to spread her message. She often wore a red shawl and carried a large alligator purse. Women must have a purse of her own. Many people did not think women belonged at the voting polls, but Anthony never gave up. On her 86th birthday celebration in Washington, D.C., Anthony remained determined. "Failure is impossible," she declared. Anthony died a few weeks later on March 13, 1906. Still, the seed she had planted grew strong. "This is the winter wheat we're sowing, and other hands will harvest it," Stanton had told her. Soon a new generation took up the battle. The 19th Amendment was finally passed by Congress on June 4, 1919, and ratified by states on August 18, 1920. That November, 26 million women cast their votes for president.